Well, good afternoon, Aristo. It's
Good.
8,
Good
10 in the
morning.
morning here, my time, and I guess 7 hours later, your time.
It's 3:10 over here.
Yeah, okay. So we've been having a pre-conversation about emotions and specifically anger, and also a little bit about slavery. So I don't know which direction you want to take off in today, but we'll start wherever you feel uh, you want to jump in at.
Well, you too should feel free to jump in. It's your video after all, and sometimes a dialogue, when you don't have imagery, a dialogue can make it more interesting, or at least some kind of input. But you mentioned your court thing and the resisting arrest thing. I'm not going to get into that. However, a lot of things came together, and obviously, once again, you affirm that we are in a prison system, a matrix type of thing. And you also had a thread about anger, and some people were pro and con about it and all of this. And again, the same new age ideologies come in about let's be happy today. In my honest opinion, the let's be happy thing is not a spiritual ideology. It's a psychological ideology. In my honest opinion, the whole so-called New Age movement is an ideological reflection of certain specific spiritualities, and around these there are other ideologies as well. Let me put it this way: if you're a mystic, if you're a religious person, you'd end up defining God. Whether it's through your Bible, through your idols, through your whatever, you end up being an agent that defines your deity, whatever you believe in, etc. If you are a mystic, divinity is what defines you. It's an ultimate receptivity where you unite with that divinity, and it's the divinity that defines you, and your own sense of input is secondary to that. I do not believe the New Age is either a religion or mysticism or really spirituality. It's an ideology.
It's a program.
It's a program. Ideologies are all programs in a sense, unless they're self-generated. But the point is that it interprets certain spiritual experiences from a mental point of view. And you have people arguing about things that they really haven't experienced or that they think they have experienced. Now, I've gotten into arguments myself, and I've also had my own experiences, but I always feel really artificial about it every time I do that. My point is, I wouldn't let that kind of viewpoint, the let's all be happy viewpoint, the smile to everybody viewpoint, the fake it till you make it viewpoint. I believe this is a minority viewpoint among people who are actually thinking. I'm not saying that people who have this viewpoint do not think or are not creative or are not insightful in whatever ways, but I believe that most insightful people simply do not have this kind of viewpoint. You will find this viewpoint among more people who watch talk shows like Oprah Winfrey and whatever, because it is actually a very establishment viewpoint among a certain group that other people call liberals. This is another label. I don't follow these labels myself, but I've heard them so often that I'm going to use it. A conservative, for example, if you look at the conservative alternative media, they are not into the let's be happy ideology, even though a lot of them are so-called Christians. They are into get angry against the government ideology point of view. Anger makes you empowered in all of this. So is this a sincere expression of anger, or is this forcing yourself, faking anger in order to feel empowerment, in order to cover your own fear? Emotions are complicated because we think them too much. We overthink our emotions. When you get angry, you go out there and people come up and they make replies such as, well, it's okay to be angry, but as long as you don't do it for too long. And it's like, well, as far as I know, emotions run their own course. So what is too long? And then, other people say, well, it's okay to be angry as long as you don't get violent. That's another restriction. The paradox is that whenever you restrict an emotion, what is doing the restricting? The mind is. And the mind is not an emotional thing. We're talking about the thinking mind. So when the thinking mind restricts an emotion or places boundaries on it, you are not accepting your emotion. You are putting boundaries. It's like this. Let's have immigrants come to this country as long as we control them. And I'm not talking about having them abide by the rules that everybody else abides by. I mean, put them in pens, make them work cheap labor, do things that ensure that they don't get out of control, because if we let them loose in our cities, even if they obey our rules, they're going to, disrupt our society. It's a kind of prejudiced suspicion against emotion that's paradoxical, and this is reinforced by the Matrix. Again, both point of views, the extreme point of view of, well, we're not slaves, it's all in our head. That's one point of view. The other point of view is we are slaves and we have to accept it before we can be liberated. So, well, the fact is that the Matrix doesn't have physical bars right there. The slavery is of a different type. It is a slavery that focuses on the mind and the heart more than the body. It focuses more on the body in order to convince the mind and the heart that it is inviolate. It's not like the slavery of the Roman Empire, for example, that had physical restrictions 24/7. Now, we do have physical restrictions 24/7, but they're of the type that if most people were free, they wouldn't even notice them. I mean, they would actually not go beyond that. Most people today, if they lived in a free society, they would not be doing too much, okay, let's put it that most people 30 years ago in the United States, which was just as much a matrix as it is now, would not be doing anything differently. In fact, they liked it. There are differences now in the United States, and most of them have to do with economic means and health and all of this, things that the establishment is doing to people. The point is, however, the same system that is running today was running back then. It was just a little more loose. It was still slavery, and a lot of people protested against it. Books had come out, but nobody paid attention because it was tolerable slavery. So now we are in the less tolerable slavery that is becoming less and less and less tolerable as it goes along. So it's a relative state. Do I feel like a slave? A lot of people who are asleep do not feel like they're slaves. And so their subjective experience is that they're content. They don't really care about freedom because they're asleep. Now, where am I going with all this? My idea is that unless we accept our emotions, we will not have the resources to either listen to higher consciousness, God, whatever, or come up with solutions that are practical, or even be able to relate to each other. Because if we do not accept our emotions regarding our slavery in a way that is libertarian, which means non-interference by the government of the mind. The mind is the governor of the person in the human condition. It plays the same role as the government. It tells you what to do. It places your identity. It puts your ID card. Your ego is your own straw man, etc., etc. Your mind is a corporate entity made of a bunch of little thoughts connected together around the central construct of straw man identity. The heart is the true being. And then deeper spiritual people would say, or consciousness is the true being. But most of our identity dynamics are the idea entity. This is how you can expand the word identity. It's the entity made up of ideas we have about ourselves, our personal history, the story of our life, the story of our experiences, everything, whether it's wrong or right or whatever. The point is, the mind plays the role of government. And this is why the archetype of the mind, which has been called Lucifer, which has been bandied about, especially in Christianity, is what controllers worship. Because we already have an inner controller. True mysticism seeks to dismantle the inner controller. It seeks deconditioning. Divinity, any mystic will tell you, divinity can't even speak to you unless you are deconditioned. If divinity cannot speak to you or you cannot connect, then that is a sign of being conditioned. If you are only accessing divinity along certain lines, those lines are where you have open access, but the other channels have conditioning blocking them for whatever reason, in whatever way. So the way you decondition is you change your government priorities. You develop a constitution and say, look, emotions have rights. Non-interference by the mind is one of those rights. And the mind just makes sure that you do not hurt others, that you follow the golden rule. So you have a conscience, and your conscience is normally the way your mind and your emotions work together. Conscience is not a guilt trip. It's simply you being open to the emotional states of other people and evaluating those states as if they were your own. Even when you feel somebody physically tormented, you are not actually in physical pain. If you see somebody in physical pain, you will feel emotional pain, right? You won't have sores open up in your body. You won't feel like you're physically in agony per se. The emotional agony may be so much that it may have physical symptoms. But this is how your mind says, because these are reflector cells in your brain that open up to an interpretation of other people's experiences, either through your five senses or beyond your five senses, that allow you to respond emotionally as if they were your own. That is called compassion. Compassion is the foundation of the golden rule. Without compassion, you cannot even conceive of the golden rule, and hence the psychopaths are where they are. So in order to cultivate these things, however, you need your emotions to be free in the sense of the libertarian type ideology. You need your emotions to have you need your mind to have a constitution and say, look, okay, compassion is going to inhibit you from affecting other people's emotions. Now, other people, however, are going to be triggered by your emotions. Just like if you go out in the street and you start screaming racist epithets, now the Constitution says that you're allowed to do so as long as you don't hurt anybody. There's no such thing as a hate crime in the American Constitution, isn't there? In the sense of you can rally, you can take your Nazi flag and wave it around in your backyard. Nobody's going to be able to tell you anything. You can go around and say, well, I think the Holocaust was 2 years, this much, or didn't exist, or whatever. Nobody's going to put you in jail for it. Right or wrong, you have a constitutional right of free speech, free expression of your ideas. So when people, however, this creates cognitive dissonance in people. And so the Constitution says cognitive dissonance is not a violation of somebody else's rights. It's just a fact of life. You might be pissed off at a thunderstorm. What are you going to do? Put up a law, say no more thunderstorms? I don't like lightning. I'm afraid. So, nature is a hate criminal. Maybe they're going to do that in the future when they're going to be promoting weather control. I don't know, but it's very likely. So we need, again, people get pissed off if somebody says, we need to do this. So I'll be nicer. It is in our best interest to be able to treat our emotions like we want to be treated by a just government. So if somebody expresses anger, then we need to evaluate that anger with respect to our own emotions. If we freak out at somebody's expression of anger, we need to then experience our expression of fear. Fear doesn't mean I piss my pants and fall down and get paralyzed and shake uncontrollably and start screaming like a baby. Fear can easily be a simple clenching of the gut when somebody's screaming over a video or whatever, a feeling of being threatened even when you're not threatened. It's a misnomer to call it cognitive dissonance, but actually it's the mind that begins it. However, there is an emotional dissonance because emotions trigger emotions. Our own emotions, if allowed to be free, will naturally turn into other emotions, and they will also resonate emotions in other people. Now, if you have a group of people who are completely pissed off and do not accept their emotions, or a group of people that do not accept their emotions, they do not want to be triggered. So they're going to react negatively, and they may project that negative reaction onto the person expressing. Or you may be dealing with somebody who is expressing hypocritical emotions. For example, a police officer screaming at you as if they're angry at you is not really angry at you. They are trained to scream at you and intimidate you and terrorize you. This is a fake emotional state. However, the fake it till you make it idea, if you do the body language like a method actor, or if you have a reason to be pissed off for something completely different, then you can generate and project an emotion onto something else. It is basically emotional manipulation. That is very unhealthy. You will be enslaved if you are subject to emotional manipulation, and yet society demands it. If I have a job and I'm a salesperson, I may have a crappy day and feel like crap. And however, I have to smile and I have to pretend I'm happy and all of this. And what happens when people do that? They get ulcers. They get sick. However, other people are under the impression that if they actually pretend to be happy willingly, they do not get ulcers and somehow they actually feel happy and become happy. Well, that's well and good if you keep your life on an even keel. If you avoid all stimulation, because ultimately you become so hypersensitive, even a sneeze is going to trigger you into resisting negativity. You will not be able to tolerate anything. Everybody around you will have to be smiling all the time. They will have to be ultra polite. Nobody can use four-letter words, and you're going to feel intense pain in your body, even if somebody sneezes the wrong way with a certain sense of passion. That is a sign of chronic emotional repression. When the salesman does it, they are doing a kind of halfway kind of repression, because they're angry, they're worked up, and all of a sudden, I'm driving my car, I'm a salesperson, I'm a door-to-door salesperson, I'm pissed off at my wife, whatever, and I'm pissed off at my mother-in-law, and I'm going to get, and then, I'm coming up to the door, I have to put that smiley face, I have to change, I have to take a deep breath, I have to do whatever. In an instant, my body's still pissed off, my mind is happy, forcing a certain happiness body language, the door opens, and I have to control the beast. But the thing is, there is no beast in the first place. We have created the beast by beating our own instinctive nature. If you have a dog and you beat the dog is going to turn, it's going to bite somebody. It's going to bite you, or it's going to bite somebody else. Or else it's just going to cower and die, prematurely. So, and we tend to look down on animals. But I'm saying your emotions are your mammalian brain. They are the mammalian part of our human nature. If we just took the pure human nature, we would have a cerebral cortex with nothing. It'd be a computer. That's what the transhumanists are trying to do, reject the lower nature. The lower nature is what gives us our vitality in life, the so-called lower nature. Or we would have a pure emotionless spirit that is in bliss, which is like a static state of well-being, which is a certain kind of emotion, but it's basically very, very rarefied. And it feels good only when there's nothing else. So it's highly prejudiced, like spotless white. If you have a spotless white field, even a tiny blemish is going to really stick out. So the more pure you become, the more intolerant you become. And so, unless you, and even the bodhisattvas of the Buddhist religion or philosophy, they feel compassion and enter a world of pain, but they are driven to get everybody else out of that world. That is their drive. They feel compassion for everybody being in it, but they cannot rest until nobody's in it and everybody's in that pristine, spotless state. So their compassion is actually driving a need for everything to be spotless, because they do not want to feel dissonance. Now, another alternative is, if you feel dissonance, you go to where the dissonance is and you heal that place. You do not remove everybody into an environment where they cannot experience life as it was meant to be experienced in manifestation. So those people who say manifestation was a mistake, more power to you. you're going to leave more room for everybody else. You know, I'm not going to bitch at people like that. They've made it their choice, and that's fine. For those people who think the world is an illusion, that's fine. Then you don't have to convince anybody else. If it's an illusion, it doesn't matter. Why would you want to convince everybody else? Oh, to wake them up to the fact that they're living a lie? But it doesn't matter. They're going to wake up anyways. To save them pain, excuse me, but when they feel that they're learning from this pain. They feel that they're gaining something. They're not like the zombies of the establishment that are completely in denial of everything. So forcefully waking anybody up, even the zombies, you know, by venting emotion, that is an emotion that is, I would say, similar to what the cop does for terrorism or what the salesman does in order to sell something. Now, I usually do this. I tend to step on toes by making these stark comparisons, but bear with me, because it's like this. If you honestly feel anger and you're in a discussion and you're expressing that anger as your true feeling, and your mind isn't having an agenda of saying, I have to convince that other person, or I'm using that, then you are not using that anger as a force to push your agenda. However, if something inside you feels that you will not feel secure unless you have convinced the other person, you know, then that is fear that is unaddressed. But how do you address that fear? Well, the same way as you addressed anger. You know, and I'm not speaking about you. I'm speaking about everybody, including myself. You know, because fear is the major emotion, and many New Agers, however you want to define that, say that. Fear is false information seeming real or something like that.
False evidence appearing real.
Appearing real. Again, that's a mind interpretation. No, fear is a very instinctive reptilian response that is highly organic, that is geared to keep us surviving in the face of danger. That's what fear is. There is nothing false about it. However, your response can be fooled by the higher mind. And so the higher mind needs to get out of the way, and the intermediary, the true middleman of your brain, the emotional mind, the mammalian mind, which is under the protection of your higher mind as a constitutional force instead of a dictatorial one. Okay, if you want to see, what did Gandhi say? Be the change you want to see. Okay, so this is where I'm coming from. Let's try this attitude. If you can be the change if you are the microcosm, as many mystical traditions say, the microcosm of the world is in you, and you are a microcosm of the world, then you are a government. You don't want to see a pyramidal hierarchy where your mind is the dictator and everybody else is the slave. Your body is a slave, your emotions are a slave. You want to see the mind as a constitutional governing force. It has a covenant. Your mind has a covenant with your spirit, which is the essence of the mind, to be able to open access to your emotions so they can be liberated. The emotions are like the lower classes, and the body's like the animals in the natural environment. So sometimes we try to protect the natural environment, the body, but we do this by oppressing the lower classes. Other times we are manipulated into releasing the lower classes in some form of communist revolution, but a mind program is behind it and sets up an even deeper dictatorship. This is what happens, for example, in certain professions like the military. You are given free rein to vent rage, to create rage, to make people afraid of you, and yet that's done in order to control you to become a killing machine. So it's another form of manipulation. So if you want to see a government in the world, you know, that is just, look to yourself and see how you treat your own inner lower classes. If you have emotions, if those emotions are in agreement that, okay, we don't understand this constitutional crap, but we do understand compassion. So if I'm venting and I feel a sense of compassion with my audience and I feel their dissonance, I need to make a choice about it. So what do? I do what they're doing. I basically complete the circle. I create an emotion that triggers other people into another emotion, whatever that may be. They may try to deny it. They may try to justify it. They may try to do whatever, but I don't care. I feel the emotion. What if that emotion is disturbance? It's fear. Denial isn't an emotion. Denial is trying to inhibit an emotion. What's under their denial? Most likely it's a form of fear. So then, if I don't accept that fear in me and end up being afraid, then aren't I also repressing? So then I feel their fear. How deep does it go? The good thing with this is you can actually ride that fear.
For the second time.
Who's
Whoops.
that? Yes. Ron's getting bored now, so.
No, I went and was responding to somebody's comment on an email, Risto.
That's okay.
I apologize for that.
No. I always ramble, and I said I'd have you talk and stuff about this, but you didn't interject, so I just kept going.
Yeah, and that's fine. Keep going.
Okay. The point of all this is that we are very, very, very uncomfortable with our emotions, and even more and more uncomfortable with emotions of other people. There has been discussion, and this goes to practical stuff about, remember Max Eigen's comments about, the ambassador and all of this, and then your comments about that, about we need to form communities. And he said we need to actually have a sense of community. Not community.
Right, yes, he did.
And people are going back into their mind and saying, how do we do this? Oh, it can't be done. Every time we tried it, it failed. It's like, okay, fine. This is a problem then. It's a problem. So if a problem arises, how can we solve it? How can we address it first? And I believe the problem is, well, what causes disunity? First of all, lack of discernment. Somebody comes in and sabotages the situation. But how do they sabotage it? Well, they play on people's emotions. They throw information that may or may not be true, that is very difficult to verify, but instead of thinking things over, people have knee-jerk emotional responses. And then what happens? Then they say, oh, it's those pesky emotions. If they wouldn't get in the way, then we could figure things out. No, because you cannot research things with your mind. There is no proof out there. Everything is so confused and so disinformed, and the sources of information can be anything. You cannot use your rational reasoning, data accessing, analytical mind to figure things out. You need to use your emotional mind. The emotional mind is the driving force behind the intuition. You need to use an open-ended feeling sense that some people disagree. Oh no, when you do away with the emotions, you have more intuition. Well, you do away with the more difficult emotions, then you have the so-called higher emotions, the feelings as they call them, and the sensate awareness of energy, and that gives you intuition. And that's true. However, an emotional manipulator will be able to bypass all that and short-circuit your intuition by creating states that push your buttons. If you don't want your buttons pushed, there's one true solution. Reclaim the panel. Reclaim the control panel for yourself and put it out of commission. Because why do we have a control panel? We blame the matrix, we blame this and that. Yeah, sure. But the thing is, we ultimately have the choice of dismantling the control panels that society set up. Because they're ours. We haven't been chip implanted yet, so there's ours. We may be brainwashed, whatever, but the fact that some of us are questioning things means that the brainwashing does not reach the deepest levels. So if we can actually relate to our emotions constructively, as most people say, it's just that they interpret it differently. But my opinion is, look, if you let your emotions release in a safe environment completely, if you're not comfortable, if you're afraid of your emotions, that's one level of fear. If you're afraid of other people's emotions, that's another level of fear. If you're afraid of what people who are in power are going to do to you, that's another level of fear. Before you address anything on the outside, you have to address the fear that relates to it. We are multi-layered terrorist victims. We are victims of post-traumatic stress syndromes on multiple layers. And so whenever we encounter one layer, we try to compensate with the denials of another layer or with an excuse from our mind. Fear is not the enemy. It is the abuse of fear, it is the denial of fear that creates the dysfunctional state that makes us victims or that puts us in a weak position to become victimized. Chronic fear is the state of the slave. We are under chronic fear, but the slave, it's the difference between hell and purgatory. In hell, there's no hope. In purgatory, you may be tortured the same way, but there is hope. There is a way out. It ends. You know, only religion says it's a specific set of time. Here, we're not sure. Nobody knows. You know, the point is that there is hope now. Hope is not completely gone. The fact that your emotions are your own is a bigger deal than anybody can ever understands for the most part. Because if they understood it, then they would realize that that is the source of power. If you want to be deconditioned, you have to let your emotions run. You have to find the wisdom of your emotions because they're artificially kept at an immature level. There is wisdom in the emotions. It's the lower intuition, you might say. Not the intuition of the gut, the way the body responds, and not the intuition of the heart and the intuitive mind so much, but something in between. Something visceral, but at the same time, it is not subtle. The power of rage, for example, the true power of rage will lead you to solutions unless it is covering up the power of fear. If there is fear underneath your rage, then your rage might cycle continuously. So what's going on? If I am an authority figure and I try to make you afraid, that means I'm projecting my fear on you. So if you are experiencing terror right now, you are denying the rage you feel underneath because you want to strike back and free yourself from my oppression. So your fear is over your rage. Now, these are roles, but underneath that rage, there's another fear. And that's the fear that if you express your rage, you're going to be overpowered. Now, fear is not false. There is a reason for it. It may be misplaced. But it has its own reason. If you allow your fear to move and feel terror in the safety without, sharing it with other people, first feel it in yourself where you're comfortable so you can deal with the fear of feeling fear on your own. Then you can learn to face the fear of triggering fear in others. And then you can, because they're going to cycle their fear to you and you're going to feel that as new fear, another layer of fear. And then that's going to cycle and it might make you afraid, but you're going to find that your mind is working differently now. Your mind is now in service to your emotions, just like the government is meant to be in service to the people. The mind is meant to serve the emotions. We think, and look what the tyrants say. They say, well, if we let the people free, they're just going to burn everything down. If we give the people this or that, they're just going to run loose. And yeah, of course they will, unless they're educated. But education is not brainwashing. Education is creating a constitutional or an agreement, a covenant with the people because they have a point. A dialogue. Now, we can't do it with each other. We can't do it with the government. We can't do it with anybody. So where can we do it? Well, we have one last bastion here of freedom, our own being. We start from there. And that is a serious foundation, folks. It's not something to scoff at or something to consider, irrelevant. Because if you really, really understood how deep it goes to the point that, okay, I have the fear of feeling fear. I have the fear of other people's fear. Then I have the fear of somebody doing violence against me. And then the fear of me doing violence, which precedes the other one, usually, to other people if I let my rage loose. So fear is the foundation emotion. It is the most primitive emotion. It makes you run. It paralyzes you. And sometimes it even makes you horny. Or it makes you fight. And fighting in desperation, the mind cannot work. However, when there is no immediate threat, which in this case usually there isn't, that's when they say the fear is false. No, it's not false. A threat that's imposed, I mean, the cops can come and bang on your door tomorrow. The threat isn't immediate, but it's there, it's real. However, because it's not immediate, you can address the fear and let it cycle and let your body accommodate and let your mind reposition itself so your mind is the service of your life force. Your life force and your emotions are very, very interlinked. Your body is more in tune with your emotions than it is with your cognition. So it's like saying the natural environment is more in tune to the natives who live there than to the oppressive governments that control them. So what happens here is a process of political liberation at the individual level. So we don't even have to speak about spirituality and stuff like that. Because if you want to open up to the beyond, you need to get your backyard in order. You need to get your own personal government in order. And it's a tall order. And when you do, doors will begin to open because you will be in a position to perceive them. Otherwise, everything's clouded, because your mind's trying to plug up holes. It's trying to plug up, the dam is breaking, the dam of whatever, of your conditioning maybe, or of anything. So reasoning doesn't work unless we go through a very difficult period of accepting stark terror where we're comfortable to do so, and then moving step by step into other zones of accepting terror. And then you can finally find yourself in a position where you don't even have to go to a courtroom, because you will notice that when you're in power, the cop abusing somebody else all of a sudden cannot repress their own fear. And they're going to have a reason to be afraid. I don't know what that will be. You may not know what that will be, but it will emerge for them, because that kind of emotion is not going to be projected on you. And you will sustain enough of an empowerment that others around you will feel inspired by it, so the authority figure will not be able to oppress them. In this way, we first create psychic communities of energy resonance before this is how I would call the word community. Communing with other people at the emotional level, at the psychic level, at the intuitive level, where they feel more comfortable with our presence and are open to our communication, because fear doesn't have a place in us other than what it truly is. Fear is the feeling of excitement. Okay, I'm going to stop this here and leave it open-ended to have people think about something at least, and so this video doesn't go too long.
Well, the whole topic of dealing with our emotions, I think, is critical to overcoming the entrapment in the matrix that we all experience to one degree or another. So it's a good topic for contemplation.
I think so.
And once again, I thank you, and I apologize to those of you that would like to see our faces. Aristo's video never came on, and I will not, my video is on, but I will not activate it for the replay. You will have to listen to the audio only. Thank you, Aristo.
Thank you.
Okay.